Now, our last speaker before we break for a nice cup of tea is Eiman Baldo. Eiman has been part of this program for the last 20 years. Eiman. From 2002, when we started, Eiman came, and we are very grateful to her for her support and for her continuous presence with us. And it's lovely to see you after so many years. Thank you, Eiman. So please do, yes.
Thank you for giving us the chance to come and protect the calamity that has befallen Sudan, the Ahmed and the Sudan program. My presentation is entitled A Chronicle of Events Foretold on the legal processes that led to the war and the legal impact of the war and its onset. I will talk about war because what is governing what is happening in Sudan now are the international humanitarian law, international human rights law, international customary law, the laws of the Rome that actually form the statute of the ICC. Hence, I call it war and not conflict. In December 2018, the people of Sudan showcased an audacious faith in the future of Sudan, in freedom, justice, and peace. People up and down the country have demonstrated relentlessly, showing a majestic scorn in the face of violence, tyranny, and death. They created a utopia by the Prophet's Square. They did not want to delve into the ambiguity of the engagement of others, especially the lack of engagement with peace when the opportunity availed itself. They wanted to defy have denied them participation in the unfolding events that impacted the very existence of their country. They deserve far better than what has become of it post-April 2023. When the warring generals, previously standing shoulder to shoulder in their campaign to derail the transition, came into a state that could be best described by the likes of Sigmund Freud as the instincts and the vicissitudes. The presentation today is on behalf of a teenage girl who actually produced a video called We Deserve to Live. It is on behalf of the families of people in Sudan, in Darfur, in Khartoum, in Al-Ubaid, currently under siege, the displaced and those on the treacherous trains out for the neighboring countries, some on the train of tears, on the way to the north without a hope of crossing over to a promised land. Those who lost their lives and livelihoods and may be en route to lose the country they wanted to hand over to their children before, the country which the young and brave have violently died for. The paper argues that a series of processes have been building up for a long time, resulting in a collapse instigated by many failures, complicities, and complacencies over the years, rumbling away in the background that could be chronicled in a pattern which could only lead to the current catastrophe. Things have been happening, staring us on the face that we are going to lead to a disaster, and nothing was done to follow that disastrous process. It wishes to show that the fall into the abyss is the outcome of the many contradictions of policy and action at the local, regional, and global level, which paved the way to the present odyssey. The methodology used is discourse analysis and text analysis of policies, laws, and reports on Sudan. It is the product of auditing for more than 4 years, all interviews in Arabic and English media, listening to hearings in the US Senate and the Congress, the UK Parliament, interviews, and the press in the UK and across the globe. The paper will explain how the different legal documents enacted post-December Revolution have enabled the protagonists to wage the current war in a way that continues the atrocities with impunity and cavalier disregard mediation attempts to stop the war. The paper has two propositions to make as a way out of the current impasse. One dealing with the nature of participation by civilians in the short, medium, and long run, and a proposal of how the international community could come up with the funds for humanitarian aid, the reconstruction of the country, and ultimately a return to a civilian and democratic rule in Sudan. Then I go with the Chronicle. Quickly, I will say that the post-colonial state in Sudan, post-1956, have seen 67 years up to now. 50 years of those were under military rule, and only the reluctant partnership between the civilians and the military post-11 of April 2019. So many of those years, everybody here know the history, and it's actually related to the work of the past. I will start with the 1989 coup, which ushered in the period of the non-splendid isolation of Sudan. The international community started the sanctions on Sudan officially long before 1997 and stopped development aid, forcing international aid to suspend all development projects and work and relief operations instead. By doing so, millions of dollars were either kept at headquarters or redirected somewhere else. This firstly calls for an urgent reform to the aid regime, and secondly, it will require a clear manifestation of accountability of the action by multilateral, bilateral, and private donors. I contend that ethically, the international NGOs have raised the funds in the name of projects in Sudan, implicating many rural and urban communities in their fundraising campaigns, which in turn will necessitate the repatriation of those diverted funds with immediate effect to those communities. Sudanese experts can work with the UK government and UN agencies towards this project. The decade of the 1990s was a lost decade for Sudan due to the aforementioned sanctions, as Sudan was denied the prospects of to benefit from the third generation conditionality of good governance and democratization, especially in the interface that pertains to the reduction of poverty and debt relief. Instead of us benefiting from that decade, another conditionality, fourth generation conditionality was imposed on Sudan. We are told you have to have peace and stop the civil war and allow the South to cease. Fourth generation conditionality designed for our sake. In 1993, Sudan was designated as a state sponsor of terrorism. 1997, the Executive Order 16067 and the Clinton administration imposing the sanctions. In 2000, this accord happened between NCP and the Turabi, becoming the Congress party. That actually led to the war in Darfur in 2003. And the militias came to actually gain some kind of importance and credibility. In 2003, the war was actually taking a very, very nasty part, and people came to know that it is going to be instigated by the split of the NCP and the Popular Congress Party. But actually, we are talking about Turabi saying that if I say no to the war, it will stop. We heard that, but we didn't do anything. Then the international community took notice. They sent AMIS, the African Union Mission, to actually do something to try to bring peace, support the kind of popular or local kind of endeavor in order to stop the war, but nothing happened. Then came Colin Powell under Bush regime, and he said sanctions are going to be imposed if you do not stop, and he called it atrocities and genocide. Nothing happened. He didn't do the sanctions, nobody took note, and he said, there are 4 things I want you to do. I want you not to mention, for me, China. I want you to actually allow the South to cease. I do not want anybody to talk about not normalizing relations with Israel, and nobody will actually exploit anyone in Darfur, and he left. Then came the CPA, 2005. What happened is a non-comprehensive peace agreement that did not actually address the war in Darfur. It was actually fester. And when people ask why not include everybody and have a comprehensive peace agreement, they were told not now. Not now. So people are complicit and actually are perpetrators to what actually led to the situation we are actually now staring on the face. The United Nations had so many resources diverted again to make by virtue of Resolution 1590, and Ms. the United Nations Mission for Sudan to support again the implementation of any peace agreement and to promote human rights and the protection of the civilians. But actually, therefore, half civilians, those people are civil people, but nothing was done to them. It is to implement the CPA vis-a-vis South Sudan that has now delayed. Now, by the stipulations of the CPA, we are working by peace to be brought to Sudan, PECA, by peace, PICA, peace by peace. Now, we are going to have some problems with Darfur. Let us go to Abuja Agreement. Solely written by one person and only included the SLA of Darfur, nobody else. In 2007, then we have the Doha Agreement for GEM. GEM also belongs to Darfur, but we are not going to be bringing all these people together because it is not now. Let everything have a very, very small kind of step to lead to the fall of the state. In 31st of July, then the UN mission, the hybrid mission, in Remit, was actually formed by the virtue of Revolution 1769 for the protection of civilians, again, and the promotion of human rights, and it deployed more than 15,000 uniformed personnel. Just bearing in mind that there is a peace agreement already over and dusted by IGAD and friends of IGAD, the three of them, and the United Nations actually meeting in Nairobi in December 2004 to peace agreements by peace, and they did not even remember that vote. I don't know why. Now, in 2011, South Sudan, of course, had the referendum. It became a new state. And then the alliance of the Sudan Revolution Front was formed. And these are the guys who are going to feature very quickly now in another arrangement, kind of event foretold. In November 2012, major reforms took some kind of hold. And I'm going to quote, because I did text analysis, of ICG report number 194, November 2012. It says only if the right incentives are in place for Bashir, not the Sudan people. Instead of actually saying penalties, they said only if the right incentives are in place, this war in Darfur will stop. The NCP needs to be party to any transition. Leaving it out in cold could be costly. Its elites are too powerful to ignore, and the opposition is too divided and inexperienced to rule alone. Remember, we're going to be having the hybrid because the civilians are deemed very inexperienced to rule. A comprehensive solution and genuine political reform, including national reconciliation accepted by all, with the NCP on board, is the only way out of this trap, or otherwise endless conflict leading to civil war will happen. That was 2012, not 2023. A Chronicle of Events Foretold. Now, Bashir is crucial to a many transition according to the ICD that incorporates both the NCP and opposition leaders of the civil and armed. So we are having the Revolutionary Front and the civilians. They are thought, and the international community unfortunately believes those think tanks and actually build their kind of terms of engagement of states on those kind of knowledge-based policy making, as they call it. But with that knowledge, without the corpus of knowledge, when it is actually done by that in a gray area without the participation of the people involved. In 2013, the RSF is created, and according to analysts, I would like to very quickly give in a nutshell the kind of background that emboldened the RSF to become a parallel army and engage in the combat that actually is leading us to the status quo. It was formed in 2013, and Ahmed at that time was promoted to the rank of a brigadier, promoted to the rank of general by 2017, and in 2019 he became a general. Burhan previously announcing that the relationship between himself and his deputy is so formidable and so fortified against any friction. They were shoulder to shoulder. RSF members increased from 30,000 in 2013 to more than 50,000 in 2017. By 2019, the number increased to more than 70,000, and in 2019, when Ahmed became the deputy of the head of the Transitional Military Council, hence TMC, he became the deputy. He swiftly became a locus of political, military, economic, and social power. Sudan now has two military armies sitting side by side in the capital, a perfect recipe for disaster. RSF was given many strategic sites over the country, 11 of which are in Khartoum, including the headquarters of the military and the presidential palace. Among other strategic locations, on 11th of July 2019, 1 month before the constitutional documents came into force, Burhan immediately had some decrees whereby actually he wanted to bring some amendments. On the first amendment for the RSF law took place on the 11th of July. The TMC, with no constitutional capacity to do so, chose to transfer the authority of the Commander General of the RSF, as stated in the law of 2017, from the head of the state. It was removed to the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, Burhan. The amendment is meant to remove the RSF from the authority of a civilian head of state who would replace Bashir if the revolution is to succeed. By virtue of this amendment, multiple jurisdictions are given to the RSF than those contained in its law of 2017, including the fight against terrorism, fight against human trafficking, the capacity to enter into contractual agreements with the EU towards monetary support, training, and equipment to fight the immigration to Fortress Europe. So they came into contractual agreement with the RSF, involving it. Now, it is also given the authority for the fight of drugs and smuggling of arms, in addition to participation in the war in Yemen. So it became a fully fledged army that has nothing to be done with any kind of authority of the Commander General of the state, if we were to have a civilian one, or for any kind of thing to do with the Sudan armed forces. Moreover, the amendment included the transfer of powers of making decrees and orders to Hemeti without referring to the General Command of the Armed Forces. All matters dealing with the recruitment, remuneration, deployment, training, and secondment inside and outside Sudan came under the sole authority of Hemeti. A new Article 26 is added to the RSF law to accommodate the new roles and that made it acquire its independence. 3 weeks later, the major and more formidable reform took place in the RFS law. Burhan repealed Article 5 of the RSF law of 2017. That article before read, when a state of emergency is declared and during war, RSF forces should be governed by the SAF law of 2007, and it comes under its command. The head of the state may at any time reintegrate the RSF forces into SAF according to the constitution and become subject to the stipulation of the SAF law. By repealing this article, RSF became its own commander, where neither the defense minister nor the executive branch of the government has any authority over it. You want to tell me how they stay the war? In terms of economic might, the RSF had many activities, including the royalties of mining of gold. We don't know what else, whether it's a uranium or it's something else we don't know about. It has so many companies that are listed in stock exchange, Al-Junaid, Al-Fahd, etc. It has the Khalij Bank, which has partnerships with China, Japan, UAE, and the United Kingdom. They didn't stop it, or they didn't sanction them so that they do not import them with the resources to wage the war. The Minister of Finance itself has some kind of contracts with this RSF and its companies. Hemeti forged relationship with Russia as a statesman and a military leader. He was appointed the head of the higher economic committee with the likes of the head of the state that time, Hamdouk, the prime minister, and the head of the Bank of Sudan. The guy did not even finish his elementary education. He was the head of the higher economic committee. September 2013, there was an uprising where all the people over the world knew that more than 200 people were killed, but nobody said anything. So now we have repression and tyranny under the guise of the world, and nobody did anything. Disaster waiting to happen. These are events foretold. Now, in 2015, a meeting took place here in the UK, whereby so many Western countries came together and they said that they are not going to change the Islamic regime in Sudan. If it is to be changed, it has to be changed with Islamists from inside the configuration. So they still don't think that the political parties are ready, as we were told before by ICT that they are not actually up to scratch. Nobody actually talked about other civilians. And now we are facing a stark kind of piece of information whereby when you come to the framework agreement and then you hear Yasser Arman and his people say that we need to have an Mu'tamar al-Shabi, the Popular Congress with us, they were not analyzing, they were not improvising. It was a dictation that they have to be party to anything to do with a regime change. In 2016, the Khartoum process took hold. Khartoum process, of course, is actually asking Ahmed to stop all the people coming from Eastern Africa, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, not to go to Libya in order to cross the sea, but to stay in Sudan, producing so many people who do not have any lives or livelihoods or addresses. So we have all of these people in Sudan, whether they are armed, whether they are terrorists, but it is fine by the EU to have those people trapped in Sudan, just on condition that they don't cross the sea to come to Europe. So you stay there, Khartoum process. Now, in 2017, the RSF law actually was now enacted, and then that same year saw the split of the SPLA North between Al-Helu and Agar, because the Helu insisted on a secular state, and he actually had his own kind of enclave, leaving Agar to actually feature in the future arrangements. The split in SPLA and North also actually is going to inform why the Juba peace agreement itself was not inclusive, because Al-Helu and Abdul Wahid were adamant they will not be party to it, but there were no sanctions from anybody around the world or anybody trying to stop the kind of resources they are having. And we are now left with some relics from the CPA in the form of the two areas, ABA. Of course, ABA had UNISFA, all of course composed by Tigranian people with the red, blue helmets, who now sought refuge, of course, after the great Ethiopian war in Sudan. So you have enclaves and time bombs left by CPA, where there are some blue helmets somewhere, but we are not having any protection for Darfur. Then the December Revolution came and actually recognized that Darfur is part of the country. It is having all those kind of people having to be displaced and killed, etc. And Kula Darfur became a struggle, etc. And after they persevered, and we're having the millions of demonstrations, all around the country. In April 2019, the first coup, Transitional Military Council, taking over from Bashir. Then, one day after, people refused Ibn and then this guy, Burhan, became the head of the Transitional Council. Then, the start of the split between these guys of what happened to the square. The city is actually an utopia. People are having a lot of things to actually aspire for, and it becomes some kind of uncomfortable thing to the state. On the 3rd of June, the massacre took place. June 30th, the biggest demonstration that made everybody actually think again. And that is actually what made this guy make the amendments in the RSF laws in order to protect any person who's going to be a culprit in the city massacre against anything they are giving them impunity. 17th of August 2019, the constitutional document was signed and became effective on the 20th of August 2019 to oversee the arrangements of the partnership between the civilians represented by the Forces for Freedom and Change and the military for a transitional period that will be led by the military and the civilians for 40 months, leading to elections and return to civilian democratic rule of the country. According to the CD, which is the constitutional document, the military would head the sovereign council for a period of 21 months, after which the civilians will take over for the rest of the 18 months. August 2019 came, and the sovereign council was formed, including, of course, 2 ladies, and the constitutional document paved the way for the first hybrid government. Now, we are reaching a space where Darfur is actually burning, people are dying, and we do not have anything to say who is going to be changing the rules of the game and asking this military government and the hybrid civilians in it to actually support people. Hamdok immediately went to the US and asked in February 2020 to have UN kind of existence in Sudan, the formation of UNITAMs by virtue of the resolution 2524. They are coming to help with the transition to democracy and protection of people. Again, civilian protection, although we saw so many resources, time and energy vested in some kind of other arrangement before. Why? Why are we having persistently a perseverance of atrocities happening and nobody is trying to unify the efforts and bringing the peace agreements and the one comprehensive peace agreement? Juba peace agreement came in October 2020. It is the depiction of a Trojan horse. It came with 8 armies inside the capital. It brought 8 armies, and worker persons were saying, how can I help a transition with 8 armies in Khartoum? That is a disaster for an event to be foretold. In 2021, Agar became a member of the Sovereign Council for negotiations, and in 30th of June 2021, UNAMID withdrew, leaving the UNITAMs with Achilles' heel. It has all the kind of provisions to help us raise funds and help the census and the elections and transition to democracy, but it didn't have the protection of civilians. So Achilles' heel was the protection of civilians. That's why nothing happened, and now we have atrocities continuing in Darfur with the protection of civilians. Actually, the UN was very aware of that because Marini DiCarlo told the United Nations Security Council that Sudan cannot be able to have this arrangement without the security arrangement. According to UNITAMS, its role is only to يحث الحكومة الانتقالية, the transition government, to hurry with the kind of arrangement it actually vowed to do according to its disposition of S 2024-9, to have 12,000 people to actually have protection in Darfur. Then UNITAMS said that you need to have the resources to do the kind of implementation of the JIPA agreement. Marie DiCarlo told the United Nations Security Council Sudan cannot do that. They don't have the resources. They had the corona. They have inflation of 229%. They didn't actually qualify for any debt relief, so they cannot have the resources. But it is told to have the resources to implement the Juba Peace Agreement, a catch-22 situation, and event foretold. So in December 2022, the framework agreement came into being with the IGAD, the Quad, and the tripartite mechanism, with no inclusion of the popular resistance committees. Actually, the resistance committees were very aware of any kind of involvement and repetition of the mistake that in April 2019 brought the military into the government formation. The framework agreement that showed this kind of rivalry of Burhan and Hemeti became very stark. So according to the resistance committees, they believe that the civilianization and violence are antithetical concepts. They don't sit together. For them, any civilian kind of formation of government has to see the army kept at bay. They cannot have it. Then they had the 3 no's. They should actually persevere. They said that we are going to be showing our sense through our sensibility. They have the 3 no's: no negotiation, no legitimacy, and no partnership. And then, in April 15, the war broke. Then, on the 10th of May, the Senate hearing, I heard it. Senator Rich was saying, you know what? The State Department is keeping us in the dark. He said, actually blinding us. We do not know what is happening in Sudan. Why didn't we call the coup of 2021 a coup? And why didn't we sanction people? We need a change of the architecture and the architects. He wanted Monife to come and say why she did not want to sanction the army generals. Why didn't she want to support the sanctions? but she was not there because she already went to Addis. So we are left, with the Senate hearing without the resources. And he actually said, we asked for some kind of answer, and it came 100 days later. So we are actually also asking for a change of architecture and a change of architects of any kind of formation that has to do with us. In the same day, May the 10th, the Human Rights Council in Geneva, because of the motion put forward by the UK government, was actually debated. I had 4 hours of that. None of the African countries, none of the Arab countries did anything to support Sudan. They let us down. So when the May 11 Jeddah agreement came, without a reference to the government, it signed the agreement between two factions. It was vehemently denying that this is not the government. It is Burhan and others. Where is the government? Who said that actually Burhan has any legitimacy after the coup, that you didn't want to call a coup? Who can actually believe he can have the capacity to enact any laws? He doesn't have that, and he took Hemeti away and brought Agar, and he said that Hemeti is a rebel. You do not have any kind of credibility, you do not have legitimacy. You can't do that, but the international community went along, and they produced the first declaration that actually did not mean anything. You can continue the war by all means, but open corridors so that people can live to where. We were actually reminded by the late Dr. Haribon in the Forced Migration Program that the first thing in Islam is sanctuary is an individual endeavor. The Saudi Arabia didn't know that closing its border is actually against the ethos of its own ideology. How would we now come and ask the warring parties to observe international humanitarian law while they did not observe their own divine revelation that you cannot fight during the Holy War? So they are playing with time and people, and in the process, making so many people die and leave the country. In May 22nd, the second Jeddah agreement came out. May 2023, Hemeti was removed and Agar came, and the framework agreement with its disregard to security and everything actually became a story from the past. Now, the African Union and the international humanitarian laws tell us that even the UK government, when it had a chance to do something, it launched its Darfur report saying that people in Darfur, 400,000 of them have been killed. Many have been subjected to a litany of abuse, including rape and sexual violence. The Darfur genocide of 20 years ago was met with startling impunity. Impunity, which is now among the many factors causing and driving further atrocities. You knew that since February 2023, this war is a chronicle of events foretold and events foretold. Now, reaching this position, we now have a depiction of the area, the landscape. We have the committees, resistance committees and neighborhood committees with their strength and sensibility. The African Union is pride. We have the Council for Peace and Security will do things, but they didn't do anything. The Arab Union didn't do anything, so they showed us their prejudice. So we have pride and prejudice, and we have the mediators with their lack of persuasion. Complete Ian Austin kind of depiction. So now we have the great expectations of the UK position. So now we need the UK government to take leadership, please, and work to unify mediation platforms. We need them to honor their commitment and increase the aid percentage from 0.5 according to OECD to 0.7 of the gross national income. And we need them to pledge funds. In addition, we need them to observe the terms of the Refugee Convention, not to close the doors, and please allow the people from Sudan and their families to come to this country. I have a recommendation. We need the international community and whoever is actually working with the law to remind us that humankind need not propagate the observance of humanitarian law. They need to enact laws with the spirit. And we need to tell us that they are against violence, revenge, aggression, and retaliation. We need to form a virtual legislative assembly so that the Sudanese are aware the world over can participate in the government of their country. We need to restore the system of aid to its previous kind of trajectory, and we need to bring the trust back in the UN system, because we lost trust on the UN system, and to introduce a viable and transparent accountability in all interfaces with engagement in Sudan, for whom the bell tolls. When in diaspora, we do not really want to talk about who wins and who loses. We owe it to the people in Sudan, the children and the youth and the martyrs. They are there, they live in me, they live in you. They are watching over everything we do. Let us not let them down. Let us do everything to restore the hope, build the trust while they're up there, and build the country we deserve. Thank you.
So thank you very much indeed, Eiman, for this wonderful portrayal of the history of the present conflict. I mean, I have some question, but I first take the floor. Sarah, yes.
Yeah, I can only stand and thank you, Iman. You've been your voice. I always, when I listen to you, I really feel very proud. Thank you very much for this talk. I would like to highlight one point, and maybe it's not for Iman, for those others who are working within the UK government are present here. You have mentioned about the issue with the think tank that provide advice to the international community. And we always have problems with who are there in this think tank, how they are picked, are they representing the people in Sudan or not? Are they the traditional political parties, or are they inclusive and representative of the Sudanese people? So those who are reaching and giving advice so that the international community can act. We might have mentioned that this has influenced a lot of decision and have influenced us negatively. How can we improve that, and how can we make sure at least the UK government is well informed?
Thank you. Let's just ask some more question. James, at the end, please.
This is a comment as well. I can't say how much I thank you. I was working in 1989, at the time of the coup there, and our work stopped because of the sanctions. I have thought ever since that maybe if it had been allowed to carry on, things might have been a bit better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mohammed here. Mohammed bin Badani.
Thank you. Everything you said is interesting. One thing you know, and I know, personally I know, you have to reach a deal with the army, whether you like it or not. Like in Algeria, army rules who takes 10% or 50% of the income of Algerian gas and oil. But my question is very simple. Do you have a charismatic leader you can count to negotiate with the world so that you can have a peace? Now, I have been here for some time now. I remember a briefing with David Miliband talking about Syria.
Yeah.
He said we will get rid of Assad within a few months. And they said, well, I look forward to see him at a state visit in Great Britain. That was about 1962, 2002. So look now, said Assad, he brought thousands and thousands of his citizens, and this will come again into the Arab League with open arms, as he has done absolutely nothing. So simply my question is, do you have a charismatic leader, say like Nasser, who can lead you? But the West and Europe will not negotiate with a bunch of Sudanese in exile. You have to have a proper trusted leader, charismatic leader who can lead you.
Thank you very much. The director of the Lebanese Center here, Nadim Shahadi, when the revolt against Assad took place in Syria, he was interviewed on the BBC, and he said in his word, Bashar is finished, and Bashar is still here with us. You see how much, the Arabs sort of somehow sometimes misunderstand the situation, not only locally, but internationally. Bashar al-Assad, as you said, is being welcomed by the Arab League to be in realize that he was fighting something different from what they think it is. I have one question for you, if I may, and that is, and I think for all our friends Sudanese, Sudan is indebted $63 billion to the international communities. These 63 billion, most of it is accumulated interest. This money has been borrowed by Sudanese, nothing to do with colonialism. British, American, Russian, Chinese, is Sudanese borrowed this money. How on earth you are going to fix the Sudan, which has been destroyed, in addition to the $63 billion? That is a question they have to ask themselves, the Sudanese. It's not a question that, it's all due to colonial. This is an easy way out. They have to look at themselves and see how could we help ourselves. And I think very important. Right. Sorry, Eiman.
No, it's all right. I actually will start with your question about the debt. When Mary left,
Yes.
the debt was 23 billion. When this government came, it was 43 billion. And as you said, all the difference is accumulation of interest. We have actually told so many observers, as I said, we lost out on the decade of the 90s. The decade of the 90s says you have to have good governance and democratization. And because we were ostracized from the international community, we only actually went under the modernization. First generation conditionality was modernization. You have to modernize. Actually, that modernization money came by virtue of the oil-rich countries, the dollar in 1973, being actually having all that money put in the international banks. And because supply and demand do not go together, supply exceeded demand, we were forced in the third world to borrow the money. Then modernization didn't work. Then we had the structural adjustment programs in the 1980s, second generation conditionality. But when we came to benefit from democratization after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and everybody was saying PRSP is a poverty reduction strategy paper whereby you actually say we have a lot of poverty in Sudan. The number of people under the poverty line are calculated. And if the debt service ratio is 200% from the debt amount of debt and the GDP, you are actually entitled to the HIPIC initiative. But we did not actually have anything to do with that. We did not take the chance. Nobody allowed us the chance, and they imposed the peace conditionality. They told Bashir that with the incentives that were actually quoted by the report, we are gonna actually not apply Article 16 of the ICC. You are not gonna be taken to the ICC. Please make the process of the cessation of the South expedient. We will have debt relief. So they did not actually also honor this kind of promise. That's why we could have had the debt relief a long time ago without accumulating 63 billion. But we were not allowed. Yes, we borrowed that money under Nimeri and Mr. Senkerson, remember Badreddin and all those guys. But we do not lack leadership and charisma. We do not want to go to shop in order to come with the international community to negotiate with them. In which international community? The one that produced all these documents without monitoring, without DDR for the Juba Agreement, whereby all these governments are saying 700 million Sudanese people, 50% of whom are under the poverty line in both definitions in the Sustainable Development Goals 1 and 2. The UNITAMs came under all Sustainable Development Goals to see their 5 objectives. They did not do any work. We don't think there is charisma in the international community. We do not see that we lack leadership. We will be able to negotiate anytime with any kind of configuration, with the IMF, with the World Bank, with the EU, and we will actually work with the UK government. We will go to Addis and mediate, and we will go to wherever in Jeddah to negotiate. We have a lot of human resource and experts.
Yeah, but that's fine. But the problem with Nimeri and his generation, the FND of the Sudan and the FND of the World Bank and the IMF, said Sudan is going to be the breadbasket of the world. They sold that narrative to these, and they say 4 billion, and it's all went into corruption. Some of them never material. And that is what I'm saying is Sudanese. They can't blame the West for it. They have to blame themselves first.
We know that. We blame ourselves first.
Please
We actually are not blaming. This is not a fault-finding mission.
No.
We are saying our governments were corrupt. Actually, those governments were the facilitators of what is taking place in Sudan now. You know, the Jabal Amr kind of resources. They do not go without the GPS location of every single gram of gold. These guys found Bin Laden and Saddam Hussein under the sea. They didn't see 29 billion tons of gold gone to Russia. They did see that. We are saying that these people are actually brought, they are reared, and they are actually given the time to come and try to govern us and destroy our country. And the generations to come have crushed hopes. I don't have a country to give to my granddaughter.
No, nothing.
So the cost is stark, but we do not want to talk about the cost of war. We want to talk about the benefits of war. Who is benefiting from this war? The beneficiaries and the benefactors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Iman, yes? Sorry,
Yeah.
do you want, Iman, do you want to answer the question being asked?
Yeah, he asked about the leadership, and I actually think that with he is asking us whether we find the leadership. One of my propositions is actually to have this legislative assembly. We're trying to find people to gauge the mood and to find who is who. We have experts, as Sarah said in her presentation. There are so many people around the country, experts who are trying to have government in exile, with all the might of power and knowledge and experience of people, and people in Sudan as well. We are trying to bring the people who even are not educated, not doctors and lawyers and teachers, by the way, the people who actually manage to live 24 hours a day with no support from anybody. They are still there in Sudan. So this virtual legislative assembly will hold any kind of advance by the likes of Burhan and Hemeti. If they think that they are going to play by themselves, they have to think again. We can actually make this kind of plan work and then have the government in exile, and we will have so many leaders, women, before men. Many.
Thank you. I think, Richard, are there some questions?
I'm just going to see if I can unmute Sanya online, who would like to ask a question. Sanya, would you like to go ahead and ask your question, please?
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Yeah, my question was, how successful do you anticipate Sudanese democracy to be in the future, given the history of other, in inverted commas, Arab Spring efforts, recognizing that each country is different with different ethnicities? I've been watching the Sudan for a long time. I was born in Durman, and I helped my mum when she established my Goma with other expat ladies. And I was very upset the other day to see, of course, what's been happening there. And I have been watching the news since 2019. I was in Parliament when the massacre of 100 people happened. And I said the armies are supposed to defend their countries. They listened then with pressure applied to the UN. The situation has been hijacked. What will good look like? How are we going to ensure what's required for the slots to ensure that in the future, given other countries' experiences, which I've also been experiencing? My husband, my ex-husband, came from Iraq. He ran for president. Look at Iraq today. We can't keep describing. It isn't an explanation. And also, as we've already said, labeling isn't a solution. We actually have to understand and make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaya.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, Sumaya, democratization is a process. It's not a project. the lady who posed the question.
Yes.
For me, whatever has happened in Sudan in the period 57 to until Aboud came in 58, and 65 to 69, the first Sadiq thing, and the one after that, I don't call that a democratic period. Those were periods whereby the voters didn't know who they are actually voting for. The head of the tribe will take that vote and give to whoever they want to do. That's why we have the people who actually, according to Professor Khalid, they are addicted to failure, because we didn't have al-wa'i, awareness raising. Education is the impetus for democracy. Unless we have that, are going to continue having procedural elections whereby you go and actually cast your vote. This is not democracy. We need a democratization process. People who are not now truants, having no education, 2% for educational health. In order for us to have this, we have to have building blocks. In order to have peace, we need to build the peace. So awareness, education, and that person, when they go, even they want to choose MFT, we are sure that they are made a free and just kind of choice. This is democracy for me. It's a process. We will be there, but for the time being, we are trying to say freedom, peace, and justice. Yes. We will bring that, and in some kind of transition, we will reach democracy in the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask?
Yes, yes, Richard.
Do you have any single key recommendation on how to bring Sudanese civilian voice to Jeddah or to other talks?
We are now working with secondary diplomacy organizations here. We have gauged some kind of information from people of how they are trying to get their voices heard. We have something called, we actually, by the way, sent a statement to the Security Council, because this second-tier organization here in the UK have the capacity to, send things to the Security Council. We have done this kind of platform in Sudan Crisis Group. We are talking to people. We are having as well help from other people on the ground in order for them to tell us how they want their voices to be heard, not us in a top-down approach. We want them to own their decision if they want their voices heard. Maybe they have some kind of arrangement whereby, because they don't want to expose themselves to danger, they will tell us what they want to say or nominate somebody. We are working on that.
Thank you. I think Paul Morchat is perhaps ready to ask this question. Paul?
Okay, I've got the question now. Yeah, it's basically to do with the failure of the political elite to agree a compromise, to reach a compromise over a transitional government. And that allowed the army to, the whole thing was prolonged, and the army now are in conflict with each other, and they're also determined not to compromise. So my question is this a beginning to the disintegration of the Sudanese state, because nobody's compromising with each other, and they're all falling back into the tribal division, which we didn't know about when you grew up in Sudan. So it's a tragedy happening, but I'm so worried that the country may disintegrate at this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, we are not trying to give the two warring generals a lot of credibility, because we think that they are not legitimate, and what they have done is out of greed and personal kind of agenda. We will try to say, as somebody just now said, they need to come and tell us. They actually owe us an explanation. We need them to come, even if they are, the Sudanese people who actually committed wrongs. We want them to come and say why they did that and what will make them stop the war in order to save so many people, the upheaval that actually has befallen them. We will actually answer your question by saying, because of the lack of leadership at the present, as we said, the political parties, they were in some kind of incubation for 30 years. Some of them were in the UK with the NDF, and Hashim was part of that. They actually did a lot of work, but they did not consolidate their effort and told the people here that, you know, we are using this space in order to encourage our people to strengthen our kind of front and have a unified voice. Up to now, we do not have a unified voice. We don't have wisdom. We went shopping for some kind of mediator. We don't have wisdom in the country. The political parties are now ashamed because they entered themselves into this kind of reluctant partnership out of their own political agenda with the military. We didn't hear anything from them at all. Not an explanation, not any kind of excuse, not kind of apology. That's why we lost the trust. That's why when we want to do anything from now on, we need to build the trust at the beginning for us to believe anybody.
All right.
I think,
Thank you. Thank you.
Paul, thank you. Can we